welcome to the deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. It is Sunday, July 14th, 2024. It is a special edition of the deal. I think if you were under a rock, you may not know this, but there was an assassination attempt on Donald Trump yesterday about 6 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. And he did not die, of course, because we would be having a completely different discussion if that happened. But he was injured, but other folks were critically injured, and one has at least died. So we'll start there. And for us to have this discussion, I need Val Atkinson. So, hey, Val, welcome back to the deal.
Great to be here, Ed, today.
Before we get started, I'd be remiss if you're watching the podcast, just see my t-shirt that I have on. And it's a picture of Donald Trump in front of St. John's Episcopal Church near the White House, where he held the Bible upside down, and I wore it on purpose because I want to remind people who we're talking about here. Assassination attempts are never a good thing. It's not part of democracy. We should have elections and get rid of people based on whether or not we feel like they can represent us politically. But I do have to remind you that Donald Trump has been fomenting violence for a long time, and one of those places he did was at St. John's when there was a peaceful protest going on outside about the George Floyd killing, and he decided to walk through the middle of that and tear gas people and so on and so forth. So I want to remind people who Donald Trump is. So let's back up. So if you see my t-shirt, that's why I have it on. So if we back up, Val, bring us up to date of where we are in this and what went on as far as you can tell.
Well, where we are now, Ed, is it appears that the investigation is on and it will be ongoing for quite some time, simply because you had the Secret Service, you had local police, the FBI is involved now, so many law enforcement entities that this is not going to be a rush, the killer is dead, sweep it under the rug type of an event. As you stated at the top of the show, there was an attempt on the ex-president's life. Fortunately, he survived, got shot in the ear. The shooter, Mr. Crooks, was not apprehended because he was eliminated, as the CIA verbiage says. He was eliminated with extreme prejudice, means he was killed. There was another death caused by, we believe, the shooter, and another very, very serious injury that we haven't had any update on for some time now, but he's still in very critical condition. And of course, all of the attention right now is in the form of a question in terms of how did Mr. Crooks get on top of that building without being noticed? How did the law enforcement personnel who was in charge of protecting a candidate for president not be in a position to have that part of the outlying area under surveillance and under control? It's what we call in golf, it was a 7-iron or 8-iron away. It was less than 150 yards. I can't believe that. Some of these semi-automatic rifles and sniper type weapons, Ed, have ranges up to a mile. That's a long ways out there, over 5,000 feet out there. So 150 yards? I mean, that's a football field and a half. It's close. You can almost reach out and touch somebody with a very accurate rifle. So Mr. Trump is fortunate, I believe, that he was not hit with a direct hit in the head, which a type of rifle at that distance would have meant instantaneous death. So we're fortunate that that didn't happen, but we're trying to get to a point now, I believe, Ed, that we can make some sense of this and come to some whys. The first why is, what was the motive of Mr. Crooks? The second one is, why are we as a nation resorting to this kind of thing to resolve distant disputes and things that are in our control to resolve in other ways? This is a political issue. We should vote differences out, do not shoot them out. So those kind of things are going to be handled through the next few days. But we must remember that through all of this, we still have an election that's coming up. And I know we're going to spend a lot of time on that. But right now, all of the focus and attention is on what precipitated, what was the cause of the shooting, what was the motive of the shooter, what can be done to stop this type of thing from happening again, and what can we do as a nation to get beyond this point that we have to resort to violence each and every time there's a disagreement.
Yeah, and we certainly shouldn't. I want to remind you, you are watching or listening to The Deal with Ed Clark and Val Atkinson. It's Sunday, July 14th. It's a sobering day because, Val, we have not had a known attempt, and I'm going to say it that way, on a candidate or a president for a long time now. 1980 is what all the news sources are saying when Ronald Reagan, the attempt on his life was made in Washington, D.C. Now going back to 1980, right? So that's a long time, 44 years ago. I can tell you, I was in D.C. On that day. As a matter of fact, I was with a group of students, and we were waiting for the president to come at a nearby hotel. And it was a close-up. You know, when you take students to D.C., you get exposed to government or whatever. And of course, it was mayhem and chaos in D.C. that day and for the days to come after that. And Secret Service, prevented Mr. Reagan, President Reagan, from being killed. But one of the people that was injured in that incident was one of the people who worked for the president. His last name was Brady. And he was seriously injured and had complications from the shooting because he was struck in the head. And for the longest time, he was a Republican, but he became a staunch supporter of limiting accessibility to assault weapons and things. So when you hear the Brady bill and things like that, that's the reference, Val. Because if you remember 1980, you're only 12 years from Martin Luther King being assassinated, right? He was assassinated in 1968. So, and Kennedy had been assassinated in 1968. The younger Kennedy, Robert. John F. Kennedy had been assassinated. Medgar Evers had been assassinated. You go down the list. Political assassinations were not something that were unfamiliar to Americans. And so Brady and his family and other people, even people on the right at the time, said, hey, we need to do something about the accessibility of guns, right? In the discussion so far, I haven't heard anybody say, part of the problem here is this 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks from Bethel Park, Pennsylvania, had access to a particular kind of weapon. Having access to those weapons make it more likely that people who are deranged or have some sort of really serious political bent will go after somebody. Are you surprised that there's been very little? I don't know if I've heard any in the last 18 hours or so since this happened, any discussion at all about why did this Thomas Matthew Crooks have a weapon of any caliber that could have reached and possibly assassinated the president? What do you got to say about that?
No question, Ed. I haven't heard one single word that would be related at all to bringing up the subject of gun control. Uh, I think we are almost to a point, Ed, of having guns baked into our culture. I'm not sure if we'll ever get it out. Right now, there's an element within our culture that wants it in so badly that it's going to take the rest of us almost a task of dismantling the entire culture in order to just get this little one piece out and then maybe try to put it back together again. Uh, I think that's one of the reasons we haven't heard anything. I hate to use the word give up on it, but it's getting pretty close to that. It's going the other way fast. We just had the Supreme Court issue a ruling that affects the bump stocks. Turning semi-automatic weapons that was used by Mr. Crooks into fully automatic weapons, the type that Bonnie and Clyde used. They used to call them machine guns and those kinds of things back in the day. So we're at a bad place when it comes to guns, when it comes to accessibility by young folks, by people who shouldn't have them at all, by some people who had domestic violence charges on their records, and you can still go down and get a gun. I mean, we're going the wrong way as far as guns are concerned. And I want to talk about my book before we get off the air. There's a special session in that about guns and where we are and maybe even what needs to be done. And we're in a bad place. We need to take this opportunity to refocus on guns and figure out who we want to be as a nation, what kind of culture we want to have here, and what role guns play in this. Can we be a nation without guns on the street? There are first world countries all over the planet that don't have the type of gun problems that we have. So we can still have a great economy. We can still have a great military. We can still be a great country without having gun proliferation as we have it right now. So we just don't have the will to do that. And there's too much money in it being made by Winchester and Colt and people and organizations like that, and too much influence by the NRA, and too much money being derived from these sources to candidates who want to run and maintain their offices. That whole circle is keeping us victims, making sure we remain victims to gun violence. Because people want to make money, people want to stay in office, people want to gain and retain power. And so we have to subject ourselves to that. The British, the French, the Germans, and many other European countries, along with South American countries, even countries in Africa and Asia and all over, they don't have these kind of problems. It's just us, Ed, and we got to learn how to deal with that.
Well, I wish we would, Val, because, again, my worry is that people who were already prone to violence will resort to picking up a gun because it's so easy and accessible, like you said. Really no checks in America. I know people say, well, you got background checks, whatever, but they've done everything they can to try to eliminate those. And it's almost laughable that anybody even says we have a system, because states, even like the state of North Carolina, are trying to eliminate pistol permits or concealed carry permits or whatever, right? They just want you to be able to, have a gun. Certain people, and we'll talk about that on another show, because I've seen these videos where on YouTube where these organizations will go out and send out a black person with a gun on his hip in the open carry state and a white person with a gun on the hip in the open carry state, and invariably always the black person is taken down by the cops. And they have the permit and everything else, and it goes to show you that we still are in a fraught place over guns. Before this segment ends, Val, one of the things we talked about before we came on is in my past life, in some of my other jobs, I have been at events where the president has appeared. I've been on advance teams where I had to, the agency I was with, provide information about things that I saw. I've talked to Secret Service before. I know some Secret Service agents or whatever. And I've also been in a position to be in meetings where I heard what threat level was for an event for a secretary or for the president. I want people to realize that this actually goes on every single day. The difference is that in those incidents when the person actually gets by all the checks and to the point where they climb up on the building and shoot is very rare. And part of the problem, I think, when you look at this area is that the local police probably should have had some more eyes and ears on this in Butler, Pennsylvania, should have had more eyes and ears. And I've seen some video of people saying they told the police. So let's look at this video and then we'll end this segment.
I was up at the fence line, saw the guy move from roof to roof, told an officer that he was on the roof. The officer come looking, I went back to where I was standing, heard that there was somebody that could see the person, so I went back to where they were standing, saw the person, went back and told the officer again that if he goes back to that particular spot, he can see the person, figuring that he would go on radio. And when I turned around to go back to where I was.
So Val, there's a guy talking to the BBC. He says that he kept pointing to the local police. There's a guy up there, you need to do something. And they're standing around looking confused. One of the things about these events is, and I'm not going to speculate on anything or whatever, but a lot of times the local police are in awe of the Secret Service and all the other things that are going on, and they kind of lose sight of what happens. I was at an event in Iowa, and the person that the Secret Service had been looking for, who they suspected was going to cause problems and try to assault the Secretary of Homeland Security at the time, he was in the audience, and I spotted the person in the audience. The local police had not spotted the guy. So I went over to the Secret Service and I said, there's the guy, because we were all briefed on, who was potentially, going to be a problem. And of course, they took the guy before he could get close to the secretary and put him in handcuffs and took him away. He was indeed armed, Val. So I do want to remind people that the local authorities have to be vigilant too, right?
Absolutely. Local authorities have to be that. And one of you were talking about your anecdotal type experiences with the Secret Service and other people here. It reminded me of my experience back in the early 70s when the funeral of President Johnson, this was after he had left office, of course, but he was funeralized at a church across the street from where I was living on Thomas Circle, 14th and N Street, Northwest DC. And I could throw a rock almost literally and hit the church. I was that close. But I was into photography at that time, and I thought of what a great opportunity to go out on my balcony and take a few shots of the funeral procession. All of these great celebrities and officials at this event, President Johnson's funeral. And I literally had 1 foot on the balcony and 1 foot still in my apartment. when I listened, I heard a voice coming from down below saying, "Hey, get back in your apartment." They didn't even allow me. They didn't allow anyone to be out on their balconies facing that church that day. They were ready for that. This had to be pre-planning. This had to be something that they decided. There are balconies facing the church. There's a roof on the Seville apartments right here, adjacent to the church. Make sure there's nobody on the roof. We don't even want anybody coming out on their balcony. If somebody's in the lobby, they must remain in the lobby until we let them out. So all of this was planned. I don't understand why, after all these years, if we could do that back in 1973, I believe it was, or 72, if we could do all of that then, why, with all the advances in technology and other things that we've had since then, why could we not have found Mr. Crooks on top of a building a 7-iron away from a former president of the United States of America? I don't understand.
Well, that is a good question, but I also hear some music. So that means we need to take a break. When we come back, we're going to answer Val's question and talk about the Republican convention coming up and a whole bunch more. So stay right there. We'll be right back after this message.
He was bullied almost every day.
In what way? Can you explain?
I mean, he would sit alone at lunch. I mean, he was just an outcast, and you know how kids are nowadays, so they're gonna see someone like that and they're gonna target him because they think it's funny or whatever. So it's the best way I can describe it. And it's honestly kind of sad. Like, I don't want to say this is what provoked it, but you never know.
Yeah. You said he was a loner?
Yeah. I want to say he was a loner more because he was quiet, but like he was just bullied. Like he was bullied so much, so much.
Even the mighty might not see it coming. It's prediabetes, and it captures 1 in 3 adults. But you can escape. Take the 1-minute prediabetes risk test to know where you stand and prevent or delay type 2 diabetes. Be your own hero on smartphones everywhere at doihaveprediabetes.org.
The FBI identified the gunman as 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks of Bethel Park, Pennsylvania. They say he fired shots from outside the secure cordoned area of the rally, atop an elevated structure.
He started shooting. Bow, 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 bow. About 4 to 5 shots rang out.
Law enforcement converged on Crooks' family's suburban Pittsburgh home overnight.
They asked us to leave our house. They told us it was a state of emergency. No warning, they just knocked on the door in the middle of the night.
Officials say the gunman fired 6 to 8 rounds from an AR-15 assault rifle before he was shot and killed by a member of the Secret Service counter-assault team. The FBI called it, quote, surprising that he was able to fire at the stage before he was killed.
And welcome back to our second segment of the deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. That's Val Atkinson. It is July 14th, 2024, another monumental day in American history, Val. And it seems like this guy named Donald Trump brings on monumental events. I mean, we had a pandemic, Val, that shut down the country for nearly 3 years. I mean, think about it. Whoever thought that would happen? Million plus people died from that. You had the January 6th insurrection. You have 30 some odd counts conviction. You have multiple felony trials that could potentially go on for this man, Donald Trump. It seems like nothing but monumental events follow him, primarily because he's an attention whore. That he is his own worst enemy, and at the same time his best advertisement. He seeks adulation. You could even see it in the form of him going off stage on the way back in. You saw him pumping his fist after he's nearly been killed, and the crowd is riled up, and you can see people in the crowd making hand gestures. Those hand gestures are hand gestures from the white supremacist side of the aisle. And I haven't heard anybody talk about that, Val, but I just did. And then so on and so forth. Which brings me to what this week is going to look like in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The Republicans will be having a convention to further canonize Donald Trump as being the patron saint of the Republicans. They're going to renominate this man. I just went down a litany of reasons why you should not even consider having him as the candidate, let alone be the president if he were to get enough votes. But nevertheless, that's where we are. Val, the Republican convention in Milwaukee this week, first, explain to me what you think they're going to say to kind of wipe away all the stuff I just laid out as being reasons not to have this man as your nominee.
First things first, Ed, we have to realize why Republicans have given their entire party over to Donald Trump. He did not come up through the ranks. They tell you to become a community organizer, try to get out the vote, learn how the system operates, run for local office, volunteer, do all of these things and work your way up and get involved in politics. No, that ain't what Donald Trump did. Went straight to the top via the escalator, straight to the top. And became the standard bearer for an entire political party. How did he do it? It was the Tea Party. The Tea Party was in search of a leader. They wanted somebody who would not just be a cow in a jewelry shop. They wanted somebody that was going to be a bull in the china shop. And that's who they found in Donald Trump, that could care less about the truth, about protocol, about precedent, about anything. Just somebody who could get under the skin of the opposition. Opposition being Democrats, progressives, and liberals. That's who Donald Trump is. That's a working definition of who he is. That's why a lot of us claim that he lies all the time. Well, that's his MO, his modus operandi. He just says what needs to be said. He never backs up. He always doubles down. Tea Party people love that because Democrats hate it, and we skirn every time he talks and that sort of thing. So they chose him to be their standard bearer. And as long as he has life within his body, and as long as he wants to be, he will continue to be their standard bearer. And I'm going to just tell you something. The 22nd Amendment is not going to get in his way. And for those of you out there who are not amendment geeks, the 22nd Amendment talks about how long an individual can be president, how many times he can be president. And it says you can only be president for 2 terms and a maximum of 10 years. If you serve 2 terms for somebody else, as Johnson served 2 years rather of somebody else, as Johnson did for Kennedy, then he was still eligible to spend 2 terms of his own. He could have spent 10 years. But that's about it. But I don't think the Trump people with the Tea Party would let that get in the way. If they have the House, the Senate, they already got the Supreme Court, and then the executive, which runs the military and everything else, I don't know if they'll adhere to all parts of what we call our Constitution, or which they think may not be right. But at any rate, that's why Donald Trump got to be where he is. The Tea Party chose him to be their leader, and he's doing a good job at that. And it's nothing going to change that at this particular point. The only question left, and I know you're going to get to this in a minute, is who the Democrats will choose to run against him this time. Because the third party candidates don't matter. Let's get that out of the way right now. They don't matter at all. Cornel West, Kennedy, even Jill Stein, none of those people are going to play a role in this election. It's going to be the Democratic nominee, it's going to be Donald Trump, and it's going to be Kamala Harris and whomever Donald Trump appoints as his VP. So that's the way it's going to be. But we're in for trouble. We're in for trouble come November, one way or the other, because I am so afraid, Ed, that even if Trump loses, that they may not go away quietly into the night.
Yeah, well, so they've already proven that once. I mean, January 6th. And then on top of that, this Supreme Court has not shown a willingness to hold anybody accountable for January the 6th. First, in this whole BS about this absolute immunity under the second Article 2, where the president's powers are enumerated, they've almost said that you could do damn near anything. Now, I've heard folks say that don't worry. In the order, in the opinion by Justice Roberts, who wrote for the majority, he said, "You guys are overblowing this. Then nobody's ever going to do that. Don't worry." He tried to admonish Justice Sotomayor and Kagan and Brown Jackson that they had a hypothetical that could never ever happen because it's never happened before. The hypothetical, of course, that everybody focused on was the question down in the lower court, Val, where they asked, what if the sitting president decides to assassinate his opponent? And for all intent and purposes, the court said, well, don't worry about that. If it's an official act and there's a reason for it, then we'll sort that out in the court. Well, we can't even get the cases against Trump through the court now. I think Justice Roberts finally acquiesced to the far right. I think for the longest time, he wanted to make it appear that he was a reasonable man because he did, join the left side a couple of times to stop some really stupid stuff before, but now he feels like he has no choice, right? That Donald Trump and the Republicans and MAGA are entrenched, and Gorsuch, Thomas, Coney Barrett, Kavanaugh, and Alito are in firm control. The courts are firmly in control of the right, and there's almost nothing you can do. My fear is, Val, and we didn't talk about this before, but it makes me think, why did the Democrats not, and I'm going to go all the way back to 2008, why did they not expand the court? Why did they not force the passage of a universal health care? Why did they bail out Wall Street? Why did they, and I can keep going down the list, right? No matter how much we like Barack Obama or Joe Biden for that matter, or Bill Clinton, there were times when Democrats could have done some things that would have protected us from this kind of court and from the kind of candidate that Donald Trump is. but they didn't put those protections in place. You have worked in politics. You have advised people under campaigns and stuff, and people don't know how those inner workings go. Can you explain to me a little bit about how the hell we ended up in this place where clearly the right is a minority? They may be 30%, but they run every damn thing. How did that happen?
Well, it's something called compromise and capitulation on the part of Democrats. Democrats believe firmly in this whole business of bipartisanship. Most sane people think that bipartisanship and compromise are means to an end. That's how you get somewhere. It's not a goal unto itself. Some people that have too much power in the Democratic Party don't subscribe to that notion. They really think that the best and the first thing to do is to compromise and have bipartisanship. That's what happened in 2009 that you're referring to, Ed. And I've said this several times before, when 59% of the House was Democratic. We had 60 U.S. senators caucusing with the Democratic Party. We had a Democrat in the White House who just happened to be an African American. And we went to the Republicans and asked them, what type of health care bill do y'all want? What can we have and what should we not have? And that's the time that you're talking about, Ed, that we could have expanded the courts. That's the time that we could have put things like qualified immunity on the table to save some lives caused by renegade and rogue police officers. That's when we could have done a lot of things that we didn't do because we let compromise and bipartisanship get in the way. Republicans don't do that. They don't come to us and ask, how would you like this bill to be fashioned? How should this be read? They do it the way they want to, the way they promised their constituencies that they would. And then they come to us and say, hey, there's the bill, all 2,000 pages of it. You got until midnight to read it and tell us and vote on it, okay? That's the way they do things. We don't do that. That's not nice. And so that's one of the reasons that we can't get things done. And I warn everybody that can listen to us this morning, I warn you that even if we maintain the presidency, if we take the House back and retain the Senate, we still will not do anything about the courts. You know, and you should, if that's the way you feel, you tell the people that when you go out and ask for their vote. You complain about Dobbs v. Jackson, abortion. You complain about Shelby v. Holder, the death of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. You complain about all of these things, and then when you get a chance to do something about it, you sit on your hands. So talk to the people and don't tell them about what you've done. Tell them about what you're going to do in detail about the court situation, about the court stacking that came about when Mitch McConnell decided he was going to make sure that the court got to be conservative and stayed that way. Tell us what you're going to do to change that. Don't tell us how bad it was. We already know that. Tell us what you're going to do. And those are the things I fought Democrats for. You know, it's called guts, we used to call it. You got to have guts. You got to step up to the plate and you got to make something happen. And you can't care what the opposition think all the time. You can't care whether or not the opposition is going to agree with you so you can go and sell the little old widow lady an hour on the idea that we did this through compromise and we had bipartisanship. You know, I look at things that impact the daily lives of our citizenry, Ed. Things like better infrastructure, and better educational systems, and a greater economy. And when people have better standards of living, when their lives are better because of great policy and decisions, they don't care if it's bipartisan or not. They don't stop and say, well, did we get this bridge through bipartisan efforts, or was it, you know, they don't care. They want a bridge that works. They don't care. They want to keep Social Security and expand Medicare and Medicaid. They don't care whether it's bipartisan or not. And Democrats need to stop going down that road and stop trying to woo the little old widow lady in Iowa who are telling them that lie. Well, I can't make up my mind between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. You know, it's 6 in one hand and half dozen in the other. They're both about the same. Well, that's a damn lie. And you know it. Only Democrats fall for that lie. Most of the people who tell you they are in the middle and they can't decide are lying to you. They've already made up their mind. They just don't want to tell you who they're going to vote for. And you fall for that lie and you go out and try to get that undecided vote by compromising and getting into bipartisanship. It's just so sad.
Yeah, we should not keep falling for the okie doke. You know, Val, like I said, the Republican convention is going to start tomorrow. There are already people in Milwaukee. There was supposed to be a reception last night, but obviously that got canceled. Reince Priebus, the former head of the Republican Party, who, from my point of view, should hate Donald Trump, but like all of those guys do, they're sycophants and they don't want to be on the outside looking in. So they'll compromise all their good sense and rational thinking and still support Donald Trump. I'll be interested in what the speakers are going to say during the convention. Obviously, it's not what I wanted to watch this week, but I guess I'm going to watch every minute of it because I'm going to be interested, one, in how they spin this assassination attempt. They're already talking about having hearings next week. I heard Speaker of the House Johnson talk about that. He's going to drag up people from Department of Homeland Security, which is where the Secret Service sits now. It used to be in Treasury, but I think it's under Homeland Security now. And call them up there because I think they're going to try to blame this on people at the White House. Watch. And I bet you'll hear speeches from the floor saying that violence is being fomented by Democrats because they call Donald Trump violent. I'm going to tell you, Donald Trump is violent. He's encouraged violence. In the words of Malcolm X, the chickens have come home to roost. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't have to worry about getting kicked out of the nation, so I can say it. And I'm not limited by anybody going to govern, what I say here. But for the last 12, 13, 14 years, Donald Trump has been one series of threats to the republic after another. And I enumerated a lot of them. And I think people should listen to what actually gets said at this Republican convention. And that should solidify, at least, I won't say Democrats, but people who are reasonable to not vote for Donald Trump and to vote for whoever is the Democratic nominee. And like you said, Cornel West is not going to win for president. Jill Stein is not going to win for president. Robert Kennedy Jr. is not going to win for president. What you need to do is think this through. Let's try to put an end to this nightmare that's been Donald Trump the right way, which is by voting him or not voting for him, not allowing him to get back into the White House. Anyway, I hear some music. That means we need to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about a book by this guy named Val Atkinson, and because he's written about how guns have proliferated in the country and how the Republicans use that. And then we'll talk about one of his cohorts, Joe Biden. They're in the same age bracket, and we want to talk about what this whole ageism thing is about as it relates to Joe Biden. So stay right there. We'll be right back after this message.
When it comes to making plans, you are the best. The same way you plan each detail for those moments, start planning to protect you and your loved ones from a natural disaster. Protecting your family is the best plan you can make.
Take a look at what happened.
The FBI says the gunman, who was on a nearby roof, killed a spectator and wounded 2 others before being shot dead by snipers. Well, as you can see, security agents rushed to protect the former president. They later hurried him off stage with blood on his face. In a social media post, Mr. Trump said a bullet had pierced his ear. He's now in New Jersey, where he plans to spend the night at his private golf club. This image, obtained by the entertainment news outlet TMZ, shows the exact moment the shooter, who was lying on his stomach, lines up his shot from the roof. Clearly questions about how he was able to do that without being stopped. The gunman was shot dead moments after this.
Welcome back to our third and final segment of the deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. That's Val Atkinson. We've been chopping it up this morning. Obviously, you have to be under a rock to not know that Donald Trump was probably inches away from no longer being here. I have on my Donald Trump t-shirt today in honor of him making it through, him at St. John's Episcopal Church right there by the White House, where he held the Bible upside down. And because I want to remind people who Donald Trump is. Irrespective of what happened, it should not have happened. Thomas Matthew Crooks, 20 years old, of Bethel Park, Pennsylvania, tried to take him out. And that is not the right way to do it. Let's repeat that again. That is not the right way to do it. Do not assassinate people. Do not even feign that you may commit violent acts against people. Put guns away for sure, but also don't run up on the Capitol building and break windows and put gallows up in the parking lot at the Capitol. Don't do that. Don't commit acts of violence for political reasons, because it never gets you anywhere. You can look at countries around the world that have political upheavals that are violent. You just continue to have violent overthrows. At some point, you have to stop and think and do this the democratic way, which we just talked about. The Republican convention that's coming up. Donald Trump will pick a vice president candidate to run with him. I'll be interested in who that is. I have no idea. And in light of what happened, it'll probably be something really wacky, but we'll see. Before we left, I said that we were going to talk about a book that you wrote, Val, and you just recently updated and re-released it. Go ahead and tell us about the book first, and I want to dig into one of the sections where you talk about guns. Yeah. So,
well, the book is entitled Distractions, Distortions, Deceptions, and Outright Lies. And I'll just read the cover to you. It says, diversions that keep the South red, poor people poor, and plutocrats and oligarchs in power. How the right uses God, guns, gays, genealogy, and gerrymandering to deceive voters and control the voting process to the extent that it causes them to vote against their socioeconomic self-interest. For more than a half century, since the passage of the Voting Rights Act, conservatives have used these diversions to keep voters, mainly white, male, working-class voters, staunchly affixed to the conservative mantra. And as Ed had said, one of the chapters in this book is about guns and how the Heritage Foundation, the NRA, ALEC, and a lot of other conservative groups and organizations use guns to get votes and get lots and lots of money to run these campaigns and to convince people out in rural America that, hey, the Democrats want to take your guns. We're going to make sure that they are not taken away. We're going to give you more guns so that you can defend yourself when the war starts, the second Civil War, when the marauding hordes from Chicago and Philadelphia and Watts and Atlanta and places like that when they come out to the rural areas to take your guns away and harm your wife and daughter. So we want to make sure you have guns to defend yourself against them. So that's the premise that they sell all the time, which is not good. But speaking of selling, you can find my book on Amazon and other places that sell good books, and or traffic.com. That's my publisher. And it's out in paperback and hardback right now as we speak. So I'd invite you to go out and take a look and pass the word on, because I've made some bets that I didn't come on the winning side against Ed Clark, and I got to pay him back. So I need the money.
Well, yeah, buy that book, Val. But on a serious tip, Val, you enumerate these things: God, guns, so on and so forth, and that is one thing that the Republicans have been extremely successful at, is sticking to message. And so as we talk about how do the Democrats then build a case to keep Joe Biden one on the ticket, or just to vote for a Democratic candidate, whoever it is, Kamala Harris or Gavin Newsom, or, all the other, Gretchen Whitmer, the names that keep getting thrown out. The Democrats don't seem to have those G's. They don't have G's, A's, B's, C's. They don't have any things that you could really point to. I mean, had the Democrats, stuck to, we're going to provide health care, we're going to provide infrastructure, we're going to provide, whatever, right? And had these 5 things that they always talk about all the time. What we've had instead is always being in response mode, and then responding to the fact that the Republicans were able then to get enough people on the court, then to have Dobbs, and then we have to vote against a state law or amendment to completely outlaw abortion, right? We're always reactionary. We're not in the lead position. In your study, in trying to write this book, you identified what the Republicans are doing. And we talked a little bit about this whole notion of bipartisanship on Democrats, but doesn't it go deeper than that? There's almost something wrong with liberalism in that it's like there's this unwillingness to say, this is where we stand, and we're not going to allow this, that, and the other. Where does that come from on the liberal side?
Where it comes from, I think it has its roots, Ed, in trying to be all things to all people. You can't do that. What you've got to be able to do is pick a point, stick to it, and know that some people are going to disagree with you or take the opposing position on that. And nonetheless, you've got to stick with that and tell them why you're sticking with that. That's what we've been unable to do. Democrats have, for a long time, been trying to do everything that everybody would like. That's why they get hung up on the little old widow lady in Iowa when she's sitting in front of her abacus and her Ouija board trying to figure out who she's going to vote for. We're still trying to get that one vote. We're still trying to be that person that everybody can find something good in to vote for, instead of going out and hanging our hat on a real firm idea, such as we are going to change the courts to 18. We're going to have term limits on the courts. We're going to overthrow Dobbs, just like the 21st Amendment overthrew the 18th Amendment and got rid of prohibition. We're going to do that to Dobbs. And we are going to expand Medicare. We're going to save Social Security. This is how we're going to do it. Put some detail and teeth in it so they'll know what you're going to do. We're afraid to do that. Democrats are afraid to do that because we want wiggle room. We want to go in and change our mind. We want to go in and change our process and procedure. So we don't like telling people that we want to have a Supreme Court of 18 or 15 and have term limits of 6 years or 8 years. We don't like being that specific. We just say things like, well, we need to make some changes on the court. Yeah, when and how? What are you going to do? I want you to tell me something so I can hold you accountable when you start talking about re-electing you. Tell me what you're going to do. But we don't want to do that because we want to have wiggle room and those kind of things. And people see that as mealy-mouth, wishy-washy, uncommitted. We don't realize that, but we lose so many votes because people don't see that you are committed to something and you got that big commitment, I call it. And I'll just give you my little anecdote on that big commitment. I learned it in a sales course. The guy was telling you got to have big commitment when you go out and make these sales. What is big commitment? I said, well, everybody know what a bacon and egg breakfast is, right? When you're eating that bacon and egg breakfast, think of this. The chicken was involved in your breakfast, but the pig was committed. So they want you to have, that's something Democrats don't have. They don't have big commitment. They don't say, I'm going to change the court to 18 with 6-year term, and you can hang your hat on that. I live and die by that. If you don't like it, don't vote for me. We don't have that kind of nerve, that kind of get up. We want to be all things to all people, and it's catching up with us. And a lot of people are saying, that's why so many people are saying, I just can't trust Democrats, you know? I don't know what they stand for. I know what they don't want, and I know what they tell me what's wrong with the other guy and why I should not vote for the other guy, but I have no idea specifically what they're going to do if I put them back in office. I know what they don't like. They're telling me that Dobbs is wrong. They're telling me that the court is terrible, but what are they going to do about it? They don't tell me.
Yeah. You know, so and that makes it even more problematic that we got this whole discussion about whether or not the Democratic nominee should even be running. So in the time we got left here, let's talk about all these calls for Joe Biden to not run, primarily because of his debate performance, but also there are people like George Clooney and people like that saying that, you know, he's not the same person he was 4 years ago. I will submit that he is probably not. I'm not the same person I was 4 years ago in terms of cognitive ability, because you just lose that over time. But I hate to put you on the spot, but you're of the same age as Joe Biden. Now you're not the president, but you could be. But you're still writing books and you're still engaged. We're having this cogent conversation right now, so on and so forth. Everybody ages a little bit different. Everybody has different challenges. Donald Trump is not the perfect speaker. I don't know where people get this idea that there's this big chasm between Trump and Biden in terms of cognitive ability and ability to talk extemporaneous off the top of their head. Donald Trump can't talk extemporaneous about anything policy-wise. He is all over the place all the time. And as an example, here, watch this. So, Val, Donald Trump babbles.
I wish covered the oranges, how it started. In the failing New York Times by an anonymous, gutless coward. They sacrifice every day for the furniture and future of their children.
Jim Apple.
Mike Pounds.
I know words. I had the best words.
Yosemites, Nambia.
Thailand.
voter ID to buy a loaf of bread.
The Democrats, ooh, there was a mosquito. I don't want mosquitoes around me.
I'm a very stable genius. The disinfectant, where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection?
I tested positively toward negative, right?
Thank you, everybody.
Yes, I
People are flushing toilets 10 times, 15 times, as opposed to once.
Sinks, right? Showers. And what goes with a sink and a shower? 10 times, right? 10 times. Wow, Bob, not me, of course, not me. You want to wash your hands, you turn on the sink, the water comes out. No, get those lights off! Off!
You have a shower. It's no good for me. Remember the dishwasher, you'd press it, boom, there'd be like an explosion.
One of the wettest we've ever seen from the standpoint of water.
And the worst president in the history of our country who is cognitively impaired.
Gook, right? Now, to be sure, I will admit again that Joe Biden did not have the best debate, but he's been in North Carolina, he's been in Michigan, he's been in Pennsylvania, he's been spoke in front of the NATO summit. He just did an interview with George Stephanopoulos. He's about to do an interview with Lester Holt, if that's still going to be on, because that's supposed to be today. And whether or not they do it in light of what happened, I think it would be in his best interest to still do it anyway. And Donald Trump, when he had his sit-down interview with Fox News, it was clear that it was edited. And Fox would not cop to the fact that they edited the interview, but it was, because clips emerged later on. This is recent, showing that in the unedited version, he can't talk. He can't stick to a subject. No more than any, certainly Joe Biden does a much better job at that. Why has this stuck, Val? And why have some Democrats come over to, we need to replace Joe Biden, when they know they got only 3 months to do this and there's no precedent for this? And then they don't, and when they say Joe Biden needs to be replaced, they don't say Kamala Harris needs to be the nominee, which would be the logical thing to say, but they don't say it. What is this about?
It's about optics, Ed. They want to be represented, or they want somebody carrying the mantle for them that is articulate, that's good looking, that's youthful, that a third party can look and say, hey, I like that guy. Or, hey, you sure have a good leader. I like your guy. And they don't want to be ashamed of their leader. It's just like in our community, Ed, in the African-American community. Parishioners love to brag about and show off their minister. My minister has a bigger car than your minister. Oh, he's got 3 houses, You look at the wardrobe my minister has. He changes twice each sermon, And Biden is just the opposite from that. Biden has problems going from one subject to the other, tributarying, as we call it in oratory places, and then coming back and finding his way back to the main subject that he talked about. Plus, he has a small stuttering problem, okay? And you put all that together, and it makes it appear that this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. But if you listen to him real carefully and you follow his thought process, he knows exactly what he's talking about. His experience comes through. And furthermore, these guys have staffs. These guys, I mean, the president of the United States, they are not making all of these decisions themselves. They don't even write their own speeches, okay? That's what all of these other people are for. So when you vote for a president, the question is, what philosophy am I voting for? What guy am I voting for that will determine what the staff looks like? Because that's the decision that the president will really make, who he surrounds himself with and what they're going to do and how they're going to do it to you. And it shouldn't be based on the most articulate, the one that makes the least amount of gaffes in a particular speech or whatever. We need to find out why we want our president to do what it is we're asking him to do. And that becomes problematic. Most Democrats right now, to the second part of your question, Ed, have no idea what the process is once you take away a leader as like Joe Biden. How do you get back to someone else? Through a brokered convention? Can he just say, I'm going to nominate Kamala Harris to take my place? How does that work? You're in a short run territory already.
Yeah.
You know, November is right around the corner, you know, and you're talking about, if you have a brokered convention where you have several people vying for that position that Joe Biden is in right now, you're going to be so splintered and divided come November that you're going to lose by a landslide. Guaranteed.
And you just hand it to the Republicans. Well, you know, Val, you know, we could talk forever and ever on this, but we won't. We're going to let people go and get on with their Sundays or whatever. But I do want to remind you that the Republican convention is this week. Keep your ear to the ground and listen carefully to what their platform is, folks. You could have some empathy for Donald Trump for what happened. I'm not saying you should not. Nobody should be shot at, period. Point blank. We're not in Civil War territory. There's nothing Donald Trump has done that we can't undo. Right now, the Democrats are in charge of the Senate and the White House. So we have a stopgap against some of the stuff, but it's not good enough. We have to maintain that. So the only way to do that is to go vote. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I think fortunately, because I am not interested in being a guerrilla fighter and trying to, fight off insurrection. So you should not be either. No, so if you're talking about, taking up arms or anything like that, I will admonish you that it's a lost cause. You will not win. There's no way to win. And then colored folks would be treated different. Trust and believe me, you would not be given the same leeway as some other folks if you had arms and you were trying to protect your neighborhood. Watch the tanks roll in there and roll you over. So don't do it. Anyway, in the meantime, I want you to go out and do something good for somebody today, and I really do mean that. And come back and join us next time for another edition of The Deal. All right, bye.
This is when the gunshots started, and then it was just chaos.